Yul Brynner stood motionless beside his black Cadillac in the dim parking lot behind Chasen's restaurant, watching Steve McQueen stagger through the shadows with the unsteady gait of someone whose liquid courage had finally overwhelmed his survival instincts, knowing that some confrontations could only end one way when drunken jealousy challenged authentic authority that had been forged in circumstances where losing meant more than wounded pride. October 1960, 11:30 at night, after the Magnificent Seven rap party had dissolved into the kind of Hollywood celebration where careers were made and destroyed through moments of poor judgment that sobriety might have prevented. If you're fascinated by untold stories where Hollywood egos collided in brutal physical encounters that revealed the difference between screen toughness and street reality, subscribe for more hidden moments where authentic violence educated manufactured rebellion through methods that left permanent scars. The rap party for the Magnificent Seven had been a celebration worthy of the film's epic scope and commercial success, held at Chasen's restaurant where Hollywood's elite gathered to mark the completion of projects that had tested everyone involved through months of challenging location work in Mexican heat and desert conditions that separated professional actors from mere celebrities seeking easy paychecks. But success had created its own tensions, particularly for Steve McQueen, whose ambitious scene-stealing throughout production had been rewarded with critical acclaim that still left him second billing behind Yul Brynner's commanding presence as Chris Adams, the undisputed leader of the seven gunfighters who had defined the film's moral center and dramatic authority. McQueen's jealousy had been simmering throughout the evening, fueled by conversations where industry insiders praised his breakthrough performance, while acknowledging that Yul remained the picture's true star, the magnetic center around which all other performances orbited like planets around an unmoving sun. The alcohol had begun early, social drinking that gradually transformed into serious consumption, as McQueen's resentment grew with each toast to the film's success that mentioned Yul's name before his own. By midnight, most of the party had dispersed, leaving behind the hardcore celebrants whose festivities had moved beyond professional courtesy into territory where personal grudges could surface without witnesses whose testimony might damage carefully constructed public images. McQueen had followed Yul into the parking lot with the determined stride of someone whose inhibitions had been dissolved by enough whiskey to make confrontation seem not just possible but necessary for his wounded ego and frustrated ambition. "You think you're something special, don't you?" McQueen called out, his voice carrying the slurred authority of someone whose liquid courage had convinced him that verbal confrontation was a reasonable approach to settling professional grievances that sobriety might have handled through agents or studio mediation. Yul turned slowly, his movements carrying the controlled precision that characterized all his interactions, even when dealing with colleagues whose judgment had been compromised by substances that removed normal social inhibitions. "Steve," Yul said quietly, his accented voice cutting through the cool night air with surgical precision that made every word seem individually chosen for maximum impact. "You've had a successful evening. Perhaps it would be wise to celebrate with people who can appreciate your performance without requiring dramatic confrontation." The diplomatic response was designed to provide McQueen with an opportunity to withdraw gracefully from a situation that could only end badly, for someone whose capabilities were limited to acting techniques rather than authentic physical skills developed through circumstances where violence served purposes beyond entertainment. But diplomacy required receptive audiences, and McQueen's inebriated state had eliminated his capacity for rational assessment of situations where retreat represented wisdom rather than cowardice. "Don't give me that European sophistication bullshit," McQueen replied, moving closer with the aggressive confidence that alcohol provided to men whose sober judgment might have recognized the danger they were courting. "You think your exotic mystique makes you better than American actors who earn their way up through real work instead of circus tricks and foreign accents." The insult was delivered with the kind of drunken honesty that revealed resentments that sobriety had kept carefully concealed behind professional courtesy and studio-mandated politeness. Yul studied McQueen's swaying form with the clinical attention he brought to all potentially dangerous situations, calculating reaction times that alcohol had slowed and assessing threats that inebriation had magnified beyond rational proportion. "Your success in the film was earned through genuine talent and hard work," Yul replied with the patience that characterized his interactions with colleagues whose emotional control had been compromised by external factors. "There's no need to diminish that achievement through confrontations that serve no productive purpose." The attempted de-escalation was sincere but futile when directed toward someone whose emotional state had moved beyond rational discourse into territory where only physical resolution could satisfy psychological needs that words couldn't address. "Fuck your condescending attitude," McQueen snarled, his famous cool completely dissolved by alcohol and jealousy that had been building throughout months of playing second fiddle to someone whose authority he couldn't challenge through conventional Hollywood methods. "You want to know what I think of your leadership and your exotic authority?" Without warning, McQueen swung a wild right hook toward Yul's jaw with the kind of telegraphed attack that revealed complete inexperience with actual violence outside choreographed fight scenes that were designed to look convincing rather than inflict genuine damage. What happened next lasted approximately 30 seconds but would be remembered by the few witnesses present for the remainder of their lives as education about the vast difference between theatrical combat and authentic violence, applied by someone whose background included experiences that most people couldn't survive and wouldn't want to attempt. Yul moved with the fluid precision that had made him legendary among those who understood that his capabilities extended far beyond entertainment into territory where physical skills had been developed for survival rather than applause. McQueen's drunken punch never reached its intended target. Yul's left hand intercepted the attack at the wrist with timing that seemed to anticipate the movement, controlling his momentum while simultaneously delivering a short, precise uppercut to the solar plexus that emptied McQueen's lungs and dropped him to his knees with surgical efficiency. The blow carried just enough force to incapacitate without causing permanent damage, applied with controlled violence that separated professional fighters from street brawlers. McQueen's breath exploded from his lungs in a sound that combined surprise, pain, and sudden realization that he had challenged someone whose capabilities operated beyond his comprehension. The first strike was educational rather than punitive, designed to end the confrontation quickly without inflicting injury that might require medical attention or police involvement that could damage both careers through unwanted publicity. But McQueen's pride, even compromised by alcohol and shock, couldn't accept immediate defeat. He attempted to rise and continue the attack, gasping for breath while trying to tackle Yul's legs with desperate persistence that his ego wouldn't allow him to abandon, despite overwhelming evidence of complete outmatching. Yul stepped aside with minimal effort, allowing McQueen's momentum to carry him face first into the asphalt parking lot surface, where gravel and concrete provided additional education about the consequences of challenging opponents whose capabilities exceeded normal Hollywood standards. The sound of McQueen's impact against the parking lot carried the finality of expensive suits meeting unforgiving reality, fabric tearing and skin abrading against surfaces that didn't care about star power or box office appeal. When McQueen struggled to his hands and knees, blood streaming from abraded skin and his suit torn beyond repair, Yul delivered the lesson's final component through methods that ensured complete understanding without permanent injury. A precise kick to McQueen's ribs, controlled force that cracked nothing but conveyed absolute authority, sent him rolling across the parking lot surface until he came to rest against the tire of a nearby Buick, gasping and finally understanding that some men possessed capabilities that entertainment experience couldn't prepare him to handle. "Please," McQueen whispered through split lips and bruised pride, his legendary cool completely evaporated under authentic violence applied by someone whose background included training that Hollywood fight choreographers couldn't duplicate. "Please, I'm sorry, I was drunk, I didn't mean to challenge you, please don't hit me again." The plea carried psychological shock of someone whose entire understanding of masculine authority had just been demolished through contact with capabilities that his privileged Hollywood experience had never prepared him to encounter. His hands were shaking uncontrollably, not just from pain but from discovering that his screen persona bore no relationship to his actual capabilities when confronted by authentic violence from someone whose background included experiences most people couldn't survive. Yul stood over McQueen's prone form with controlled calm that characterized men who had inflicted violence when circumstances required it, but took no pleasure in demonstrating superiority through methods that civilized society preferred to avoid acknowledging. "Steve," Yul said quietly, his voice carrying no triumph, simply controlled authority of someone whose point had been made through methods requiring no further demonstration. "Your talent is genuine, and your career will be successful if you don't allow jealousy to create confrontations with people whose backgrounds include experiences that your training hasn't prepared you to handle." The advice was delivered without malice, simply professional guidance from someone whose authority had just been established through direct demonstration rather than verbal assertion. McQueen nodded weakly, understanding that he had received mercy rather than justice, and that his survival depended on accepting lessons that his pride didn't want to acknowledge, but his battered body couldn't deny. The taste of blood in his mouth mixed with gravel dust provided physical reminder of how completely his manufactured toughness had crumbled when challenged by authentic authority. "Get cleaned up, go home, and remember that success in this industry requires working with people rather than challenging them through methods that reveal inexperience with situations where real consequences follow poor decisions," Yul continued, his tone remaining educational rather than vindictive. The lesson was delivered with the patience of someone whose authority didn't require constant reinforcement through violence or intimidation, simply occasional demonstration when circumstances demanded clarity about hierarchies that some people couldn't understand through verbal explanation alone. Yul walked to his Cadillac with the unhurried stride of someone whose evening had included necessary education rather than recreational violence, leaving McQueen to contemplate the vast difference between screen toughness and authentic capability that could only be developed through circumstances where mistakes carried permanent consequences rather than script revisions. The sound of the Cadillac's engine starting echoed across the parking lot like a period ending a sentence that had been written in blood and bruises, carrying with it the finality of lessons that couldn't be unlearned or forgotten, regardless of how much McQueen's ego might prefer to dismiss what had just occurred. McQueen remained on the asphalt for several minutes after Yul's departure, not because his injuries prevented movement, but because his psychological state required time to process the complete demolition of assumptions about his own capabilities that had taken years to construct through carefully managed publicity and studio-controlled image building. The incident was never reported to studio executives or discussed with journalists who might transform private education into public embarrassment that could damage careers built on carefully constructed personas rather than authentic capability. Hollywood operated on unofficial codes that protected everyone by maintaining certain silences about encounters that transcended normal professional boundaries into territory where real consequences replaced theatrical outcomes. But its impact on McQueen's subsequent behavior was immediately obvious to anyone who worked with both men on future projects. His scene-stealing tactics ceased completely, his interactions with Yul carried respectful distance that acknowledged established hierarchy, and his understanding of Hollywood power structures was permanently altered through education that formal acting training couldn't provide, and most drama schools wouldn't attempt to offer. The change was so complete that other actors began whispering among themselves about what had occurred during McQueen's absence from the party's final hour, though none were courageous enough to ask direct questions that might reveal answers they weren't prepared to handle, or witness testimonies they couldn't safely ignore. Years later, when asked about his most educational experience during the Magnificent Seven production, McQueen would describe that evening as humbling rather than traumatic, though he never provided specific details about what had occurred in the parking lot behind Chasen's restaurant, or why his relationship with Yul had undergone such dramatic transformation overnight. "I learned that there's a difference between playing tough guys and meeting real ones," McQueen would tell interviewers who pressed for more information about his evolving perspective on masculine authority and authentic capability. Some education can't be found in acting schools because it requires teachers whose qualifications extend beyond normal professional boundaries into territory where survival skills matter more than dramatic technique or publicity-generated reputation. The cryptic response satisfied journalists who were more interested in quotable soundbites than dangerous specifics that might reveal methods of education that entertainment industry insurance policies didn't cover, and publicity departments preferred to keep hidden from audiences who expected their heroes to solve conflicts through dialogue rather than direct physical demonstration. Yul Brynner never spoke publicly about the encounter, maintaining the privacy that characterized his approach to personal relationships and professional education that transcended normal entertainment industry boundaries. But those who witnessed the aftermath understood that they had seen something that revealed the true source of his authority. Not acting technique or studio training, but capabilities that existed far beyond the requirements of entertainment and entered territory where respect was commanded rather than requested through charm or negotiated through agents. Some actors learned their craft through method training and emotional preparation, designed to create believable performances for audiences who would never question the authenticity of what they witnessed on screen. Others had acquired skills through circumstances that most people couldn't survive and wouldn't want to experience, developing capabilities that served purposes beyond entertainment when situations demanded real-world applications rather than theatrical approximations.